It's often said that when symbols of hope find their way into a galaxy built entirely on despair, even the gods can't help but take notice. In a place where the very air tastes of ash and iron, and billions bow before a golden corpse they call their father, these heroes of forgotten virtues suddenly stand defiant as the Imperium's massive machinery of faith begins to turn against them. The real question, though, is what happens when the Emperor himself awakens to face the very ideals he abandoned 10 millennia ago. The warp storm appeared without warning above Terror, a violent vortex of impossible colors tearing through the very fabric of reality. Imperial Navy vessels and orbital platforms trembled as chronometers shattered and astropaths screamed in unison. On the hallowed surface below, billions gazed skyward in terror as the storm defied all attempts at containment, psychic energies cascading through layers of ancient void shields. It was no random phenomenon, but a rupture in time and space itself, piercing through the dimensions and dragging with it something the Imperium of man had never faced. In the heart of the Imperial Palace, alarms wailed as security protocols activated automatically. Custodian guards tightened their formation around the Sanctum Imperialis, where the God Emperor had sat motionless for 10,000 years upon the Golden Throne. Something had changed. Those closest to the Master of Mankind reported the faintest of tremors rippling through his withered form, a flicker of awareness not seen since the Heresy. The warp storm contracted suddenly, collapsing upon itself with blinding intensity. When the light faded, two figures hovered in the space where madness had reigned moments before. One floated effortlessly, wrapped in a crimson cape that billowed in solar winds, a symbol emblazed upon his chest that resembled an imperial aquila, but simplified to an alien geometry. Beside him, a second figure in blue armor bearing a white star and circular shield of impossible material that seemed to drink in light rather than reflect it. "Captain, where are we?" the caped figure asked, voice carrying impossibly across the vacuum. "I don't know, Superman," the shield-bearer replied, his gaze fixed on the immense Gothic architecture of humanity's throne world below. "But something tells me we're a long way from home." The Ordo Chronos, that most secretive branch of the Inquisition, tasked with monitoring temporal anomalies, had anticipated many threats to the Imperium's timeline. But never this. Two warriors from a forgotten age, heroes from Terror's distant past, had been torn from their timeline and cast into the 41st millennium. Their arrival sent ripples through the Imperium's highest echelons. Some among the High Lords whispered of prophecy fulfilled, others of heresy incarnate. All agreed. These beings represented power beyond mortal comprehension. Within hours, inquisitorial forces mobilized. The first assessment team approached cautiously, voidcraft engines straining as they matched velocity with the newcomers. The initial exchange was tense but bloodless. To the shock of hardened inquisitors, the strangers surrendered willingly, requesting parley rather than battle. The beings called themselves Clark Kent and Steve Rogers, though they acknowledged titles that resonated with ancient Terran mythology. Superman, Captain America, names that stirred forgotten memories in the oldest data crypts. The journey to Terra's surface was marked by uneasy silence. Inquisitorial psychers probed gently at the newcomers' minds only to recoil in shock. One was a psychic void unlike any of human or pariah, his thoughts impenetrable. The other radiated an aura of such unflinching moral certainty that it caused physical pain to those whose souls had been compromised by Imperial service. The assessment team commander transmitted a single-word assessment to his superiors. Dangerous, Imperial, Palace Sanctum Imperialis approach. 7 days after their arrival, Superman and Captain America stood before the Eternity Gate. Behind them, a procession of inquisitorial representatives, Mechanicus adepts, and diplomatic functionaries waited in reverential silence. Before them loomed the massive adamantine doors 10,000 years old and inscribed with battles long forgotten by mortal memory. "They're stalling," Captain America whispered, his enhanced senses noting the subtle vox transmissions and nervous energy of their escorts. Superman nodded imperceptibly. "They're afraid of us, Steve. And from what I've seen so far, fear drives everything in this place. We need to show them we're not a threat," Captain America replied, adjusting his shield. The gesture did not go unnoticed by the custodian guards flanking the entryway, their guardian spears shifting minutely in response. During their brief confinement, both heroes had absorbed what information they could about this twisted future of humanity. The Imperium of man, spanning the galaxy but rotting from within, quadrillions living in misery and oppression, fed into the meat grinder of endless war. And at its center, the God Emperor, once a visionary, now reduced to a corpse-like figure, sustaining humanity through his endless suffering. The thought made Superman's jaw tighten. This was not the future Earth deserved. The Eternity Gate began to open with the sound of ancient gears and the chanting of tech priests. Beyond lay the approach to the Sanctum Imperialis itself, where the Emperor had remained enthroned since his near death at the hands of the arch-traitor Horus. Few mortals had laid eyes upon this holy site, and fewer still had returned to speak of it. "Remember," Superman said quietly, "whatever happens, we stay together." Captain America nodded, his expression grim beneath his cowl. Till the end of the line. The Eternity Gate completed its ponderous opening. Standing in the entryway was not the expected delegation of High Lords, but a single towering figure in golden armor, Lord Commander Roboute Guilliman, Primarch of the Ultramarines, son of the Emperor, and a regent of the Imperium. The demigods studied the newcomers with ancient eyes that had witnessed the birth of the Imperium and its long, painful decline. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of millennia. "I have consulted the Emperor regarding your arrival," Guilliman stated, his massive form dwarfing even the enhanced physique of Superman. "He wishes to see what manner of beings would dare breach the walls of reality to reach terror." Captain America stepped forward, unflinching before the transhuman giant. "We didn't choose to come here, Lord Commander, but now that we are here, perhaps we can help." Guilliman's expression remained unreadable. "Help? The Imperium stands as it has for 10,000 years through the Emperor's will alone. What help could beings such as yourselves offer?" Superman's eyes flashed momentarily with an inner light, a reminder of what humanity once stood for. Justice, compassion, hope, things I've seen precious little of since our arrival. A ripple of shocked murmurs spread through the Imperial delegation. Such words bordered on heresy. Yet Guilliman did not order their execution. Instead, a flicker of something crossed his face. Recognition, perhaps, or memory. "Follow me," he commanded. "The Emperor awaits." The journey through the inner sanctums of the Imperial Palace was a passage through layers of history and security that few beings in the galaxy had ever witnessed. Custodian guards, silent and vigilant, lined every corridor. Servo skulls hummed overhead, recording every movement. Ancient technologies hummed with power that predated the Imperium itself. Finally, they reached the outer chamber of the throne room. Here, Guilliman paused. "Before you enter the presence of the Master of Mankind, understand this. He is not as he once was. The burden of holding the Imperium together these past 10 millennia has exacted a terrible toll. What you will see may not be the Emperor you expected." Superman and Captain America exchanged glances. "We understand," Captain America responded. The final doorway parted silently, revealing the sanctum beyond. The air was thick with incense and the hum of arcane machinery. Thousands of tech priests attended to the complex life support systems that filled the massive chamber. And at its center, atop a mountain of technology, sat the Golden Throne. The Emperor of Mankind was both less and more than human. His physical form had withered to a skeletal husk, skin stretched tight over ancient bones. Yet his psychic presence was overwhelming. A sun compressed into human form, radiating power that threatened to scorch the minds of all who approached. Superman felt it first, a pressure building behind his eyes as the Emperor's consciousness brushed against his alien biology. Captain America staggered slightly, his enhanced metabolism barely processing the psychic assault. A.R. Roach. The command was not spoken, but transmitted directly into their minds with such force that both heroes found themselves walking forward involuntarily. "I have watched you since your arrival." The Emperor's voice was a chorus of thousands, speaking in perfect unison. each syllable etched with pain and purpose so ancient it defied comprehension. You are not of this universe, yet you bear the marks of humanity's ancient dreams. Superman stepped forward, his cape settling around his shoulders. We come from a different Earth, a different time. We were heroes there, protectors of humanity. The Emperor's psychic presence intensified, rifling through their memories with casual disregard for privacy. Both heroes felt the intrusion but refused to resist, allowing the master of mankind to see their past battles, their triumphs and failures, their unwavering commitment to justice, even when it came at personal cost. When the psychic probe withdrew, the Emperor's next communication carried a tone that might have been amusement. Heroes. I too was once called hero by those who knew no better, before I learned that humanity requires not heroes but a shepherd, a father who understands that compassion is a luxury the species cannot afford. Captain America's hand tightened on the strap of his shield. With respect, I disagree. Compassion isn't a luxury. It's what makes us human in the first place. The Emperor's response was immediate and crushing, a wave of psychic force that drove both heroes to their knees. You speak of humanity as it was. I rule humanity as it must be to survive. The galaxy is not your simple battlefield of right and wrong. It is a slaughterhouse where only the most ruthless endure. Superman pushed back against the psychic pressure, rising slowly to his feet. His eyes began to glow with inner fire, a physical manifestation of his defiance. If that's true, he said, voice steady despite the strain, then what was the point of it all? Why fight to preserve humanity if you strip away everything that makes it worth saving? The question hung in the air unanswered. Instead, the Emperor's next communication shifted to something unexpected. You may prove useful. The Imperium faces threats beyond your comprehension. Serve me, and you shall have purpose in this age. Guilliman watched the exchange silently, his transhuman face unreadable, but in his eyes flickered something that might have been hope, or perhaps memory of a different emperor from a different age. And if we refuse, Captain America asked. The Emperor's response was simple. Then you are against me. The audience was over. Guilliman led them from the throne room in silence, the weight of the Emperor's judgment heavy upon them. It was only when they reached the outer chambers that the primarch spoke again. You have been granted a rare opportunity, he said. The Emperor seldom takes direct interest in individuals. He offers you positions of significance within the Imperium. Superman shook his head. That wasn't an offer. It was a threat. It was both, Guilliman replied. But understand this. The Imperium you find so abhorrent is all that stands between humanity and extinction. The cruelties you have witnessed serve a purpose. They have kept the species alive for 10,000 years in a galaxy that hungers for our destruction. Captain America studied the demigod's face. You don't sound entirely convinced of that yourself, Lord Commander. Something flickered in Guilliman's ancient eyes. I serve the Emperor and the Imperium he built. My personal convictions are irrelevant. Are they? Superman pressed. From what I understand, you were revived after 10,000 years to find the Imperium had become a twisted reflection of your father's vision. That has to haunt you. Guilliman's face hardened. Careful, outsider. Many have been executed for lesser presumptions. Yet here we stand, Captain America noted, alive, despite challenging the Emperor to his face. Why? The Primarch turned away. You will be assigned quarters within the palace while the High Lords determine your status. I suggest you reflect on the opportunity presented to you. It will not be offered twice. As Guilliman strode away, Captain America turned to Superman. He didn't answer the question. No, Superman agreed. But I think in his own way, he just gave us permission to find out. Their accommodations within the Imperial Palace were luxurious by the standards of the Imperium, yet still felt like a prison. Servo skulls monitored their every movement. Guards stood at constant attention outside their chambers. Officially, they were honored guests. In reality, they were assets to be contained until their utility could be determined. 3 weeks passed. They were paraded before the High Lords of Terror, interrogated by representatives of every major imperial organization from the Inquisition to the Adeptus Mechanicus. Blood samples were taken. Psychers probed their minds. Combat capabilities were tested in controlled environments. Through it all, Superman and Captain America complied, watching and learning. What they learned filled them with growing horror. The Imperium was not simply authoritarian. It was a regime of deliberate cruelty. Billions sacrificed daily to maintain the Emperor's light. Worlds decimated for the slightest deviation from imperial dogma. Technology suppressed and innovation punished by death. Human potential crushed beneath the weight of tradition and fear. It was during a rare moment of privacy that they made their decision. "We can't stay here," Captain America said, voice barely above a whisper. Not as decorative symbols used to justify more oppression. Superman nodded, his superhearing focused on the movements of guards outside their quarters. "Agreed, but leaving Terra won't be easy. And then what? Where do we go in a galaxy we barely understand?" Captain America paced the chamber, mind racing through tactical possibilities. "We start small, find allies. There must be elements within the Imperium who recognize how far it's fallen from its original purpose." "Guilliman," Superman suggested. "He may be loyal to his father, but I sense doubt in him. Too risky. He's watched too closely." Captain America counted. "We need someone with resources but less scrutiny." Their discussion was interrupted by the chamber door sliding open. A robed figure entered, face obscured by a deep hood. Both heroes tensed, ready for confrontation. The figure raised a hand in a gesture of peace. "I am Inquisitor Greyfax of the Ordo Hereticus," a woman's stern voice announced. "And I believe we have mutual interest to discuss." Katarina Greyfax was not what either hero expected from an Inquisitor. Where most of her kind reveled in ostentatious displays of imperial devotion, she was austere to the point of severity. Her psyker abilities were formidable, though she made no attempt to breach their mental defenses. "I have been monitoring your processing," she stated flatly. "Your capabilities are remarkable, even by the standards of this age. Your moral framework, however, is dangerously obsolete." Captain America's expression hardened. "Is that why you're here? To explain why tyranny is necessary?" Greyfax's face remained impassive. "I am here because in 3 days you will be separated. The Kryptonian will be transferred to Mars for extensive study by the Mechanicus. Captain Rogers will be inducted into a specialized Imperial Guard regiment for deployment against the Tyranid hive fleets." "They're splitting us up," Superman realized. "Using us as weapons, precisely." Greyfax's eyes were cold but not unkind. "The High Lords fear your potential for disruption. They cannot execute you without risking the Emperor's displeasure, so they will use you until you are expended." Captain America studied the Inquisitor carefully. "Why tell us this?" "Because I have seen the truth that you represent," Greyfax replied. "I have served the Imperium for centuries. I have ordered exterminatus on worlds, condemned millions to death for the crime of insufficient faith, all in service to a vision of humanity's survival." She paused, something like doubt crossing her severe features. "But in your minds, I glimpsed something I had forgotten existed. A humanity worth preserving, not merely for survival, but for its potential for good. The Emperor I pledged my life to once believed in that potential." "You're risking everything by coming here," Superman observed. "Why? Because the Imperium is dying," Greyfax said simply. "Not from external threats, but from within. It consumes itself with paranoia and hatred. Perhaps you beings from a more hopeful age can remind us of what we were meant to become." She placed a small metallic disc on the table between them. "This will disrupt the monitoring systems for precisely 12 minutes. It is all I can offer without arousing suspicion. What you do with that time is your choice." With that, she turned and left as abruptly as she had arrived. Superman picked up the device, examining it with his microscopic vision. "It appears genuine." Captain America nodded grimly. "Then we have 12 minutes to escape the most heavily fortified structure in the galaxy. 11 minutes and 42 seconds to be precise." Superman corrected, activating the device. The next 11 minutes were a blur of precision movement and split-second timing. Superman's superhuman senses mapped guard rotations and security systems. Captain America's tactical genius charted their escape route through the labyrinthine palace. Together, they moved with the coordination of warriors who had fought side by side across countless battlefields. They encountered their first real resistance. 4 minutes in a patrol of custodian guards alerted by some unknown sensor their disruption device had missed. Golden warriors, each the equal of 10 space marines armed with guardian spears that could pierce even Superman's Kryptonian hide. Non-lethal takedowns only, Captain America ordered as the custodians charged. Superman nodded. Always. What followed was a display of combat prowess that would later enter Imperial legend. Superman moving at speeds that made him appear as little more than a crimson blur, disarming custodians with precision strikes that found the weak points in their ancient armor. Captain America's shield bouncing with impossible accuracy between columns and walls to strike pressure points and weapon servos. In 37 seconds, 5 of the Emperor's elite guardians lay unconscious but alive. The heroes continued their escape, knowing that alarms would now be sounding throughout the palace complex. 8 minutes remaining, Superman reported as they reached a service shaft that descended toward the lower levels. "We need to move faster." Captain America surveyed the vertical drop that extended for Colome into the foundation of the palace. "How much weight can you carry while flying at full speed?" Superman's response was to grab his companion and dive into the shaft, accelerating to velocities that would have killed an unprotected human. Captain America, his body enhanced by the super soldier serum, endured the G-forces with gritted teeth. They emerged in the underhive of terror, that labyrinth of ancient structures and forgotten technologies that lay beneath the Imperial Palace. Here, even the Adeptus Arbites feared to tread without significant force. Perfect for 2 fugitives seeking to disappear. 5 minutes, Superman announced as they navigated the dark passages. "We need transportation off-world. The spaceport is too heavily guarded," Captain America replied. "We need an alternative." Their solution appeared in the form of an Adeptus Mechanicus cargo shuttle, preparing for departure to an orbital facility. With seconds to spare, they stowed away in the vessel's maintenance compartment, surrounded by arcane machinery that hummed with potential danger. As the disruption device's effects faded and Imperial forces realized their prized assets had escaped, the cargo shuttle lifted off from Terra's surface, carrying with it 2 legends who had just declared silent war on the Imperium of Man. Mechanicus, Orbital Facility Alpha 12. Terror System the Omnissiah provides. "It seems," Captain America whispered as they observed the bustling activity of the Mechanicus shipyard from their hiding place. The cargo shuttle had docked 6 hours earlier, and they had remained concealed among its machine components, evading the cursory security scans. Superman's enhanced vision penetrated walls and decks, mapping the facility. There, he pointed to a distant berth. Merchant vessel preparing for warp transit. Minimal crew, automated systems, perfect for our needs. Captain America nodded. "Can you determine its destination?" Superman focused, reading data slates and display screens from hundreds of meters away. "Segmentum Pacificus, a frontier world called Atticus Prime. Far from terror." "Good." Captain America adjusted his shield. How heavily defended. 3 combat servitors. Standard security protocols. The Mechanicus doesn't expect intruders here. Superman paused, his expression troubled. "Steve, I need to address something." Captain America recognized the tone. The moral dilemma of stealing a ship. Partly that, but more importantly, our purpose here. Superman's gaze was steady. We're stranded in a future we never asked for, fighting an Imperium we barely understand. What's our endgame? It was the question that had haunted both of them since their confrontation with the Emperor. Captain America considered it carefully before answering. In our time, we stood for something greater than ourselves. An ideal of what humanity could be at its best. That hasn't changed. He gestured toward the surrounding facility. This Imperium has forgotten those ideals. It survives through fear and sacrifice, not hope and cooperation. If we can remind even a fraction of humanity what they've lost, maybe that's purpose enough. Superman smiled slightly. A new crusade then, not for conquest, but for humanity's soul. Starting with 1 ship and 2 ancient heroes, Captain America acknowledged with a wry smile, "Not the worst odds we've faced." Their infiltration of the merchant vessel was methodical and precise. Superman disabled security systems with bursts of focused heat vision, careful to mimic mechanical failure rather than deliberate sabotage. Captain America neutralized the combat servitors with targeted shield throws that damaged motor functions without triggering alarm responses. Within 20 minutes, they had secured the bridge. The ship's Mechanicus adept, a middle-aged woman, more machine than human, regarded them with augment eyes that betrayed no emotion. "You are the fugitives from Terror," she stated flatly. "Inference with Mechanicus property carries the penalty of mind wipe and servitor conversion." Superman stepped forward, hands raised in a placating gesture. "We mean you no harm. We require transportation, nothing more." The tech priest's augmented eyes worded as they focused. "My logic engines calculate that resistance would result in my termination. However, compliance would constitute tech heresy." "We're offering a third option," Captain America interjected. "Help us willingly, and when we reach Atticus Prime, you'll be free to return with a story of being overwhelmed by superior force." The tech priest was silent for 15.7 seconds. Mechanical implants clicking softly as calculations ran. "An interesting proposition. My designation is Magos Explorator Dahlia 79. I have served the Omnissiah for 73 standard years. In that time, I have witnessed the mechanic stray increasingly from the path of knowledge toward blind dogma." Her mechanical hand made a gesture that might have been resigned. "Perhaps the quest for knowledge requires unorthodox methodologies. I will assist, but on one condition." Superman raised an eyebrow. "Name it that you explain the technologies of your origin. Such knowledge would be unique in the Imperium." It was a reasonable request and one that posed minimal risk. Captain America nodded his agreement. "Then we have Accord Dahlia 79 announced. Be advised that warp transit carries significant dangers to the uninitiated. The Gela field protects the material vessel, but your minds may be vulnerable to immaterial predation." "We'll manage," Superman assured her. "How soon can we depart?" "Immediate departure is inadvisable," the tech priest replied. "Security protocols require clearance from Mechanica's command." "However," she added as her mechanical fingers danced across control surfaces, "a catastrophic systems failure would necessitate emergency protocols, including autonomous warp jump to the designated safe harbor." Captain America smiled grimly. "And what might cause such a catastrophic failure?" Dahlia 79's partly human face showed the first hint of expression, something approaching satisfaction. "Theoretical exposure to an unknown energy source, perhaps emanating from one of your exotic biologies." Superman understood immediately. Focusing his heat vision at minimal intensity, he directed a narrow beam toward a non-critical system junction. Alarms immediately blared as the ship's machine spirit registered unexpected energy patterns. "Fascinating," Dahlia 79 observed. "The Omnissiah has much to learn from you, outsider." The merchant vessel broke from its moorings 15 minutes later, automated systems engaging emergency protocols as designed. By the time Mechanicus authorities realized what had happened, the ship had already translated into the warp, leaving only confused reports and speculation in its wake. The journey through the warp was an experience neither hero was prepared for. Despite Dahlia 79's best efforts to prepare them, the immaterial realm defied rational explanation. Superman, whose Kryptonian physiology had proven resistant to so many threats, found his dreams haunted by phantoms from his lost world. Captain America endured visions of fallen comrades and futures that might have been. Through it all, they maintained their resolve, emerging from the warp 19 days later, changed but unbroken. Atticus Prime awaited a frontier world far from Terra's influence, but still firmly within the Imperium's grasp. Imperial Navy patrols are minimal in this sector, Dahlia 79 informed them as they approached the planet. However, standard protocol requires verification of our identity and cargo. Detection is inevitable. Captain America studied the tactical display. "We need a diversion, something to draw attention while we make planet fall." Superman considered their options. The ship's auxiliary craft. "If I overload its engines in high orbit, it would register as a catastrophic mechanical failure." "Casualties?" Captain America asked immediately. "None, if timed correctly, but it would trigger automatic response protocols from orbital defenses." Dahlia 79's mechanical components worded in what might have been approval. "An elegant solution." I shall prepare the auxiliary craft for launch." The plan worked with precision. As the merchant vessel approached Atacus Prime, its auxiliary craft launched with apparently faulty engines, climbing to high orbit before detonating in a spectacular but harmless display. Planetary defense forces responded as expected, focusing all attention on the apparent accident while the main vessel made an unauthorized landing at a remote supply depot. By the time Imperial authorities realized what had happened, Superman and Captain America had already disappeared into the teeming underhive of Atticus Prime's capital, Hive Attacus Secundus. Dahlia, 79, true to her word, reported being overpowered by the mysterious fugitives. Her memory engrams conveniently damaged during the encounter. The hunters had become the hunted. The first step in their crusade had begun. Hive Atticus Secundus proved to be both haven and education. For 3 months, Superman and Captain America lived among the lowest levels of Imperial society, witnessing firsthand the suffering and oppression they had only glimpsed on Terror. Here, far from the seat of Imperial power, the Imperium's true nature was laid bare. Manufacturing workers labored 18-hour shifts, their bodies failing under toxic conditions, all to meet production quotas for wars fought light years away. Ecclesiarch priests demanded tithes from those who could barely feed themselves, promising salvation through sacrifice. Arbitrary executions carried out by Arbites enforcers for infractions as minor as questioning authority. But they also found courage, small acts of defiance and compassion that persisted despite generations of conditioning. A manufacturing foreman who falsified records to allow workers rest days. An underground network that redistributed food to the starving. A tech priest who provided forbidden medical care to the mutated and rejected. It was through this network of quiet resistance that they made their first real allies. A former Imperial Guard officer named Tarian Voss discharged after questioning orders to execute civilians. A navigator named Elizabeth Cade on the run after refusing to guide ships carrying Death World toxins to be used against rebelling Imperial worlds. A rogue trader captain, Marius Blackthorn, whose conscience had finally overridden his profit motive. Together, they formed the core of what would later be called the Liberation Front. Their first actions were small and symbolic. Sabotaged munitions shipments, disrupted Arbit's operations, redistribution of confiscated medical supplies. Each operation meticulously planned to minimize casualties while maximizing impact on Imperial authority. Word spread quietly, first through the underhive, then to neighboring sectors. Stories of ancient heroes returned to challenge Imperial tyranny. Legends from old Earth come to remind humanity of forgotten virtues. 4 months after their escape from Terror, they made their first public appearance. Arbite's precinct fortress, Hive Atticus Secundus. The execution was scheduled for midday. 57 citizens convicted of sedition for participating in food riots. The sentence delivered by Planetary Governor Titus Morton himself was to serve as example to others who might question Imperial authority. Thousands were forced to attend. Manufacturing shifts cannoned to ensure maximum viewership. Arbites enforcers surrounded the execution ground. Hellguns primed. Servo skulls hovered overhead, recording everything for later broadcast throughout the hive. The first prisoner was led to the block, a young woman whose only crime had been organizing her fellow workers to demand additional food rations. The executioner raised his power axe, its disruption field humming with deadly energy. The axe never fell. A circular shield of red, white, and blue struck with impossible precision, knocking the weapon from the executioner's hands. Before anyone could react, a blur of crimson and blue descended from above, landing between the prisoners and their would-be executioners. Superman and Captain America stood side by side, facing the shocked Arbites' forces. For a moment, silence reigned as the implications registered with the crowd. Captain America spoke first, his voice carrying across the plaza without need for amplification. "People of Atticus Prime, you were gathered here to witness a demonstration of power, to learn that resistance against tyranny is futile." Superman stepped forward. "Instead, you will witness something the Imperium has tried to make you forget. That authority derived without consent or compassion is no authority at all." The Arbite's captain recovered from his shock, raising his bolt pistol. In the name of the God Emperor, you are ordered to surrender." What followed was a display of power and restraint that would burn itself into the memory of everyone present. Superman moved with impossible speed, disarming enforcers before they could fire a single shot. Captain America's shield bounced between targets with mathematical precision, disabling weapons but never taking lives. Within minutes, over 100 Arbites lay incapacitated but alive. Not a single prisoner or civilian had been harmed. Captain America retrieved his shield as Superman broke the prisoner's restraints. "This is not an insurrection," Superman announced to the stunned crowd. "This is a reminder. The Imperium exists to serve humanity, not the other way around. You deserve better than to live in fear of those sworn to protect you." Captain America addressed the prisoners directly. "You have a choice now. Return to your lives or join us in showing the Imperium that there is another way. One built on cooperation instead of fear, hope instead of despair." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Not just the freed prisoners, but hundreds from the crowd surged forward, casting off the paralysis of generations of Imperial conditioning. The Liberation Front gained more members in that single day than in all the months prior. As Imperial reinforcements mobilized, Superman lifted Captain America into the air, hovering above the dispersing crowd. "This is only the beginning," he called out. "Spread the word. Humanity deserves champions, not tyrants." Then they were gone, leaving behind only stories that would spread like wildfire across the planet and beyond. The response from Imperial authorities was swift and predictable. Martial law declared across the entire sector, increased Arbit's presence, public executions of suspected sympathizers, all the tools of oppression that had served the Imperium for millennia. But something had changed. The fear that had paralyzed resistance for generations began to crack. Small uprisings flared across Atticus Prime. When violently suppressed, 2 more would emerge elsewhere. Imperial forces found themselves facing not organized military opposition, but something far more dangerous: widespread civil disobedience. Factories reported mysterious production shortfalls. Arbites discovered their equipment sabotaged. Naval vessels experienced unexplained delays and mechanical failures. Nothing that could be traced to specific perpetrators, but collectively the disruption was significant. Through it all, Superman and Captain America were everywhere and nowhere, appearing to rescue civilians from Imperial crackdowns, then vanishing before reinforcements arrived, broadcasting messages of encouragement and tactical advice through hijacked Vox networks, always emphasizing nonviolent resistance wherever possible, reserving direct confrontation for the most egregious abuses of power. 3 months after the public execution incident, Planetary Governor Titus Morton requested assistance from the Sector Lord. His message was clear: Atticus Prime was slipping from Imperial control. The response came not from the Sector Lord, but from terror itself. The High Lords had been monitoring the situation with growing alarm. The rebellion on Atticus Prime was dangerous not for its military significance, but for the ideas it represented. Ideas that could spread faster than any physical contagion. A strike force was assembled. 3 companies of Adeptus estates from the Imperial Fists chapter, specialists in siege warfare and planetary compliance. An inquisitorial task force led by Inquisitor Hector Rex of the Ordo Malus, a psyker of tremendous power and, most ominously, a detachment of Sisters of Silence, the Null Maidens, whose very presence negated psychic abilities and disrupted warp-based powers. Their orders were explicit: capture Superman and Captain America if possible, eliminate them if necessary. The rebellion was to be crushed with such overwhelming force that no world would dare emulate it. The strike force arrived in System 6 weeks later. Their approach was deliberately visible, a show of overwhelming force meant to crush resistance before battle was joined. Drop pods and Thunderhawk gunships descended upon H. Hivatus Secundus in a display of Imperial might not seen in the sector for centuries. What they found was a city completely abandoned. Superman and Captain America had evacuated the entire Hive population 3 days earlier, using intelligence networks to anticipate the Imperial response. Over 20 million citizens had simply disappeared into the vast underhives and surrounding wastelands, guided by resistance networks to prepared sanctuaries. Captain Darnath Lysander of the Imperial Fists stood in the empty governor's palace, his massive Terminator armor making the human-scaled furniture seem like child's toys. A psychological ploy, he observed to Inquisitor Rex. They seek to demonstrate their control over the civilian population. Rex's face was deeply lined, eyes burning with cold fury. This goes beyond mere rebellion. Captain, these creatures challenge the very foundation of Imperial authority. They offer an alternative to the Emperor's vision. Then we shall remind them why alternatives to the Emperor's vision are intolerable, Lysander replied. Bolter held ready as if expecting ambush despite the city's emptiness. Their confrontation came sooner than expected, but not in the form they anticipated. As the strike force established command centers throughout the abandoned hive, a single figure appeared on every still-functioning picked screen and Vox unit. Superman. His expression resolute, but not hostile. Captain Lysander, Inquisitor Rex, Sisters of Silence, I address you directly because unnecessary bloodshed serves neither your goals nor ours. In the command bunker, Rex snarled orders to trace the transmission. Tech priests worked frantically but reported the signal originated simultaneously from thousands of sources throughout the hive. On Kreen. Superman continued. You were sent to crush a rebellion, but what you're facing isn't rebellion in any traditional sense. The people of Atticus Prime haven't rejected the Imperium. They've simply remembered what the Imperium was meant to be. Lysander's Syriamite gauntlet crushed the armrest of his command throne. The arrogance of this creature surpasses understanding. Captain America and I propose a direct meeting. No ambushes, no reinforcements, just a conversation between warriors who each believe they serve humanity's best interests. Perhaps understanding can be reached without further conflict. Rex laughed coldly. A trap, obviously. If you accept, Superman continued. Come to the primary manufacturing complex alone. Captain Lysander, bring Inquisitor Rex if you wish, but no other forces. We will do the same. The transmission ended, leaving the command bunker in tense silence. After a moment, Lysander rose to his full height, towering over the human personnel. I shall meet these heretics, he declared. Not for negotiation, but to take their measure before battle. Rex's expression was skeptical. The Imperial Fists are renowned for courage, Captain, but this is reckless. Lysander's helmeted face turned toward the Inquisitor. The Imperial Fists are also renowned for doing what must be done regardless of risk. These enemies have challenged Imperial authority directly. Honor demands a response. 6 hours later, Captain Lysander and Inquisitor Rex approached the manufacturing complex on foot, a deliberate show of confidence. Despite their agreement to come alone, a squad of Sisters of Silence had been deployed in concealed positions throughout the area, their null auras, ready to neutralize any warp-based abilities Superman might possess. The vast manufacturing doors opened as they approached. Standing in the entrance were Superman and Captain America, unarmed, save for the iconic shield. Captain Lysander, Superman acknowledged with a respectful nod. Inquisitor Rex, thank you for coming. Lysander's response was, Kurt, I come not to parley with heretics, but to offer you one opportunity to surrender to Imperial justice. Captain America stepped forward. We've studied the Imperial Fists during our time here, Captain. Your primarch, Rogel Dawn, was renowned for his honesty and his commitment to humanity's defense. Would he recognize the Imperium you now serve as the one he helped build? The question struck deeper than Lysander would admit. The Imperial Fists prided themselves on their lineage and adherence to their primarch's principles. But before he could respond, Rex interjected, You speak of things you cannot comprehend, creature. The Emperor's vision transcends your primitive morality. The Imperium endures because it must by any means necessary. Superman's gaze shifted to the Inquisitor, and that's where we fundamentally disagree. Survival without purpose is just existence. Humanity deserves more than mere existence. What humanity deserves, Lysander replied, finding his voice again, is protection from the horrors that would consume it. Chaos, Xenos, the darkness between stars. Your rebellion weakens that protection. Does it? Captain America challenged. Or does it strengthen humanity by reminding people what they're fighting for? A future worth having, not just endless sacrifice for a crumbling status quo. The debate might have continued, but it was interrupted by the distinctive sound of teleportation devices activating. Despite the agreement, Lysander had arranged contingencies. A full tactical squad of Imperial fists materialized, bolters trained on the two heroes. Superman sighed, disappointment evident. I expected better from the Sons of Dawn. What happened next would later be described in hushed tones by those who witnessed it. Superman moved with such speed that even the enhanced reflexes of the Astartes could not track him. Bolter shells fired in desperation seemed to curve around him, missing by millimeters. Captain America's shield flew with impossible precision, disarming Marines without causing lethal damage to their power armor. Within seconds, 10 of the Emperor's finest warriors lay incapacitated, but alive. Lysander himself found his Terminator armor locked in place by Superman's grip, the material that could withstand tank shells bent by Kryptonian strength. "We could have killed them all," Superman said quietly to the immobilized captain. "Remember that we choose restraint not from weakness, but from strength." With that, both heroes simply disappeared, moving faster than even augmented Astartes senses could follow. They left behind confused and humiliated Imperial forces and a message more powerful than any military victory. Later that night, as Imperial commanders planned their response, reports came in from across the planet. The population of Atticus Prime had not fled in fear as assumed. They had dispersed in accordance with a carefully orchestrated plan. Small settlements had appeared in the wastelands between hives, self-sufficient communities operating on principles of cooperation rather than imperial hierarchy. More disturbing still, Imperial Navy vessels reported multiple unauthorized warp jumps from the system. Civilian ships carrying both people and ideas to neighboring worlds. The contagion of hope was spreading. Inquisitor Rex, reviewing these reports in the command bunker, came to a chilling realization. "This was never about holding one planet," he murmured. "This is about starting a movement." Captain Lysander, his pride wounded but his tactical mind sharp, nodded grimly. "They seek to recreate the Great Crusade. Not through conquest, but conversion." "Then we must respond in kind," Rex declared. "This is no longer a compliance action. This is an existential threat to Imperial authority." The astropathic choir was activated immediately, sending urgent psychic messages to Terror. The response was immediate and unprecedented. The High Lords declared a state of emergency across Segmentum Pacificus. All available military assets were redirected to contain what was now being called the Liberty Heresy. For Superman and Captain America, the Imperial escalation was anticipated, but still sobering. From the bridge of a commandeered transport ship, they watched tactical displays showing massive fleet movements converging on Atticus Prime and neighboring systems. "They're committing everything." Captain America observed battle fleets, Astartes chapters, even Titan legions, all to crush an idea. Superman's expression was resolute because they recognize what we've known from the beginning. The Imperium's greatest vulnerability isn't military. It's the fragility of absolute control. Once people remember they have choices, the entire structure becomes unstable. Captain America studied the tactical projections. "We can't fight them conventionally. Even with your powers and my tactics, we'd be overwhelmed eventually." "We don't need to fight them conventionally," Superman replied. "We just need to keep the idea alive long enough for it to take root." The Emperor built his Imperium through inspiration as much as conquest. We can do the same. Their strategy shifted accordingly. Instead of holding territory, the Liberation Front became truly mobile. Strike teams led by trusted lieutenants spread across dozens of systems, each carrying the core message of reform rather than revolution. Superman and Captain America themselves became a symbol more than a direct leadership, appearing at critical moments to inspire or defend, then vanishing before Imperial forces could respond effectively. The pattern repeated across 100 worlds. Imperial governors would declare total compliance only to find their carefully controlled populations engaged in passive resistance. Astartes would secure a hive city only to discover propaganda spreading through their own support staff. Inquisitors would purge suspected rebel cells only to create martyrs that inspired further resistance. For 18 months the conflict escalated. The Imperium, accustomed to crushing external threats through overwhelming force, found itself ill-equipped to counter an enemy that attacked its legitimacy rather than its military assets. Every excessive purge, every orbital bombardment, every civilian casualty only validated the Liberation Front's central argument that the Imperium had betrayed its original purpose of protecting humanity. The conflict might have continued indefinitely, consuming ever more Imperial resources, had not events on Terror forced a dramatic escalation. Golden Throne Chamber, Imperial Palace, Terror. For the first time in 10,000 years, the technicians and priests attending the Golden Throne witnessed something unprecedented. The Emperor's withered form moved, not the slight tremors that had been reported during Superman and Captain America's initial arrival, but deliberate motion. A skeletal hand raised slightly, then fell back. The chamber erupted in panic and religious ecstasy. The Captain General of the Custodian Guard was summoned immediately. Reports were sent directly to the High Lords and to Roboute Guilliman, who had been coordinating the military response to the Liberty Heresy. Within hours, the primarch stood before his father's throne, witnessing with his own eyes the impossible. The Emperor's consciousness, which had been focused entirely on maintaining the Astronomicon and holding back the predators of the warp for 10 millennia, was turning its attention to the material realm once more. "Father," Willen whispered, falling to one knee before the ancient technology that sustained the master of mankind. The Emperor did not speak aloud. His physical form too damaged for conventional communication, but his psychic voice thundered in Guilliman's mind with an intensity that would have destroyed a lesser being. "These interlopers challenge my vision. They sow discord in my Imperium. They must be answered." Gillian, his transhuman mind processing the implications, responded carefully. "We have committed substantial forces to containing the rebellion, Father, but their ideas spread faster than we can suppress them." The Emperor's response was immediate and frightening in its clarity. "Then I shall answer them myself." Across the galaxy, psychers screamed in unison as the Emperor's consciousness surged through the warp. Astropaths died by the thousands, their minds burned out by the intensity of the psychic message that radiated from Terror. Even non-psychic humans felt the pressure. A sudden awareness of divine attention focused with terrible intensity. On a frontier world called Horizon's Edge, Superman and Captain America were coordinating the evacuation of civilians from an Imperial compliance action when they felt it. A presence in their minds so vast and ancient it defied comprehension. The Emperor had found them. "I have watched your rebellion with interest. Outsiders, you have reminded my Imperium of its past. A past I deliberately abandoned as insufficient." The psychic voice was deafening, threatening to overwhelm even Superman's alien consciousness. Captain America staggered, his enhanced physiology barely processing the assault. "You speak of hope and compassion as if they are strengths. I ruled when humanity was young, when such luxuries seemed possible. I learned the truth. In this galaxy, only unyielding strength and sacrifice ensure survival." With tremendous effort, Superman responded, not with words, but with mental images, the communities they had built on dozens of worlds. Humans working together without coercion, productivity increasing rather than declining when fear was removed as motivator. The ancient values of Earth not just surviving but thriving in the grim darkness of the far future. The Emperor's response was cold, an insignificant sample, a temporary aberration. Humanity requires control to prevent its own destruction. "You will return to Terror. You will kneel before my throne. You will acknowledge the necessity of my vision, or you will be destroyed." The psychic presence withdrew as suddenly as it had appeared, leaving both heroes shaken. Around them, humans who had experienced even the fringes of the communication were in various states of collapse or religious fervor. "He's afraid," Captain America realized, recovering his composure. "Beneath all that power and certainty, he fears what we represent." Superman nodded slowly. "Because we've proven his central assumption wrong. Humanity doesn't need tyranny to survive. They can be better than he believes they are. So what now?" Captain America asked, his tactical mind already calculating possibilities. He's just invited us back to Terra, to the most heavily defended location in the galaxy. Superman's expression was resolute. Then that's where we go. Not to surrender, but to challenge him directly. Not with violence, but with the truth he's been hiding from for 10,000 years. It's a trap, Captain America pointed out. He's consolidating forces to eliminate us and crush the movement in one stroke. Of course it is, Superman agreed. But sometimes you have to spring the trap to accomplish the mission. They spent 7 days preparing. Messages were sent throughout the Liberation Front, establishing contingency leadership and ensuring the movement would continue regardless of their fate. Their most trusted lieutenants argued against the plan, calling it suicide, but both heroes remained resolute. On the 8th day, they did something unprecedented. They surrendered. A Liberation Front vessel transmitted surrender protocols on all Imperial channels, approaching a battle group of the Imperial Navy with shields lowered and weapons powered down. When boarding parties of naval armsmen and inquisitorial stormtroopers breached the vessel, they found Superman and Captain America waiting peacefully in the main cargo bay. "We accept the Emperor's invitation," Superman informed the shocked commander. "We will return to Terra to present our case directly." The journey to Terra was a carefully orchestrated spectacle. The heroes were transported in a specially designed null cage developed by the Mechanicus based on data gathered during their initial arrival. Sisters of Silence maintained constant vigil, their null auras theoretically dampening Superman's powers. Inquisitors and librarians monitored for any psychic or physical anomalies. The convoy was escorted by no less than 3 Astartes battle barges and a full battle fleet. All of it, Superman and Captain America recognized, was as much for propaganda as for security. The Imperium needed to demonstrate control over the symbols that had inspired rebellion across hundreds of worlds. They arrived at Terra 27 days later. The approach to the throne world was lined with Imperial ships of war, a show of overwhelming military might. On the surface, millions were gathered in enforced celebration of the heretics' capture. Ecclesiarch priests led prayers of thanksgiving for the Emperor's inevitable judgment. The processional through the Imperial Palace mirrored their first arrival, but with none of the uncertainty. This time they were presented not as mysterious visitors, but as conquered enemies. Their null cage was paraded through massive chambers where High Lords and planetary governors watched with satisfaction. Guilliman himself stood at the entrance to the Sanctum Imperialis, his expression unreadable. As they approached the final doorway to the throne room, Superman met the Primarch's gaze directly. "You know this isn't right," he said quietly. "You've seen what we've accomplished. Worlds prospering without the yoke of fear." Guilliman's response was equally quiet. "I know my duty, outsider, as should you." The doors to the Sanctum Imperialis opened, revealing the golden throne in all its terrible majesty. The Emperor remained as they had seen him before, a withered husk sustained by ancient technology. But the psychic presence was immeasurably stronger. Focused with terrifying intensity, the null cage was positioned before the throne, Sisters of Silence forming a perimeter around it. High Lords, Inquisitor Lords, and Chapter Masters of the estates filled the chamber, witnesses to what was intended as the final defeat of the Liberty Heresy. The Emperor's psychic voice filled the chamber, broadcast not just to those present, but psychically projected across the Imperium. "You return as commanded. Your rebellion ends here." Superman stood tall despite the constraints of the null cage. "We return of our own free will to speak truth before power. The Liberty Heresy, as you call it, was never about rebellion. It was about remembrance." Captain America continued, his voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber. "Your Imperium was built to protect humanity, to guide it toward a better future. Somewhere across the millennia, protection became oppression. Guidance became tyranny. Necessity dictated every evolution. The galaxy is not as you knew it, strangers from the past. It is predatory, merciless. Only through absolute unity and sacrifice can humanity survive." "We've heard this argument before," Superman replied. "From Darkseid, from Red Skull, from every tyrant who justified atrocity in the name of necessity. But we've seen the alternative. On world after world, we've proven that humanity can thrive through cooperation rather than fear. The Emperor's psychic pressure intensified, a tangible weight that threatened to crush all resistance. You have seen nothing. Brief moments of peace in a cosmos of eternal war. Your vision is limited by your mortality. Perhaps it is, Captain America acknowledged. But it's that very mortality that gives us perspective you've lost. Humanity isn't just something to be preserved like a specimen in amber. It's something that must be allowed to grow, to change, to choose its own destiny. The debate might have continued. Philosophical arguments exchanged between beings of tremendous power and conviction. But it was interrupted by the most unexpected development of all. The null cage designed to contain Superman's Kryptonian abilities began to fail. Not through any action of the heroes themselves, but through a fundamental miscalculation by its designers. The Mechanicus had built the cage assuming Superman's abilities were warp-based, similar to psyker powers. But his Kryptonian physiology operated on principles entirely foreign to the Imperium's understanding. The solar energy stored in his cells interacted with the null field in ways no one had anticipated. The first indication was a subtle luminescence of his skin, a golden glow that intensified despite the null auras. Suppression. Then, with a sound like crystal fracturing, the cage began to crack. "Impossible," breathed an Inquisitor Lord, reaching for his weapon. But before violence could erupt, Superman raised his hand in a gesture of peace. The cage continued to fail around him, but he made no move to escape or attack. "We didn't come to fight," he stated clearly, his voice carrying over the rising alarm. "We came to prove a point. Right here before the throne itself, Captain America, released from the collapsing cage alongside his companion, placed his shield on the ground in a deliberate gesture of non-aggression. Your Imperium rules through fear because you believe there is no alternative. We're here to demonstrate there is." The chamber had become a tableau frozen in tension. Space Marines with bolters raised. Custodian guards with guardian spears poised to strike. Sisters of Silence advancing with Nullby blades drawn, all awaiting the Emperor's command to execute the interlopers who had defied containment. But the command did not come. Instead, the Emperor's psychic presence probed deeper into the minds of the two heroes. No longer seeking to overwhelm, but to understand, he saw their histories, their battles, their unwavering commitment to ideals, even when they came at personal cost. He saw the worlds they had transformed not through conquest, but through example. And perhaps most disturbingly, he saw reflections of his own original vision, before the grinding necessities of galactic rule had hardened it into dogma. When the Emperor spoke again, the psychic voice carried a tone not heard since before the Heresy, not commanding, but questioning. "What would you have me do? Dismantle the structures that have preserved humanity for 10 millennia. Risk all on your untested idealism." "Not dismantle," Superman replied. "Transform gradually, world by world. The Imperium has survived through fear. Imagine what it could accomplish through hope." Captain America stepped forward, addressing not just the Emperor, but all assembled. "Your Imperium stands at a crossroads. Continue as you have and watch as worlds increasingly question the protection that comes at such terrible cost, or evolve, incorporating what we've demonstrated is possible. Not weakness, but a different kind of strength." For long moments, silence reigned in the chamber, broken only by the hum of ancient machinery sustaining the Emperor's life. Then something unprecedented occurred. The Emperor's physical form moved, a withered hand raised slightly, then fell back. The psychic presence receded momentarily as if in contemplation. When it returned, it carried a decision that would alter the course of Imperial history. "I will observe one system under your guidance. Demonstrate the validity of your vision. Succeed, and perhaps the Imperium may evolve. Fail, and your experiment ends." Murmurs of shock rippled through the assembled Imperial dignitaries. Guilliman, standing closest to the throne, showed no reaction save a slight narrowing of his ancient eyes. "We accept your challenge," Superman replied without hesitation. "With one condition," Captain America added, "that all who joined our cause be granted amnesty. Their only crime was believing in a better future." The Emperor's response was immediate, granted, conditional upon their return to Imperial compliance. The system of Proxima Centauri shall be your laboratory. You will have 5 Terran years. Success or failure will be judged by me alone." With those words, a conflict that had threatened to tear the Imperium apart reached an unexpected resolution. Not victory for either side, but something rarer and more valuable: the opportunity for evolution. The news spread across the galaxy with unprecedented speed. The Liberation Front, prepared for martyrdom, found itself instead tasked with governance. Imperial forces, positioned to crush rebellion, were ordered to stand down and observe. Inquisitors raged against, heresy tolerated, while planetary governors watched with mixture of fear and fascination. Proxima Centauri, ancient among human colonies, became the focal point for an experiment 10,000 years in the making. Superman and Captain America, transported there with full Imperial sanction, began the work of building a microcosm of what the Imperium might become. The transition was not without challenges. Generations of Imperial conditioning could not be undone overnight. The requirements of galactic civilization, from tithe obligations to psychic choir maintenance, could not simply be discarded. External threats, from Xenos raids to Chaos incursions, remained ever present. But over months and then years, a transformation took place. Productivity increased as forced labor gave way to incentivized cooperation. Military recruitment rose when defense became a matter of choice rather than conscription. Innovation, carefully managed to avoid the catastrophes of the dark age of technology, began to accelerate technological development. Most significantly, a new form of faith emerged, not the blind obedience demanded by the ecclesiarchy, but a profound respect for the emperor as humanity's protector, combined with individual moral responsibility. Heresy was redefined not as questioning, but as actions that genuinely threatened human survival. Throughout it all, the Emperor watched. His consciousness, divided between maintaining the Astronomicon, battling the predators of the warp, and observing the Proxima experiment, found itself increasingly drawn to the latter. Something long dormant stirred within the master of mankind. Not hope precisely, but the memory of what hope had once meant. 4 years into the experiment, as data confirmed its preliminary success, a new crisis emerged. A tendril of Hive Fleet Leviathan, diverted from its main path, detected the psychic signature of Proxima Centauri and altered course to consume it. The system faced imminent Tyranid invasion, a threat that even Superman's Kryptonian powers could not simply overcome through strength alone. The response revealed how truly the Proxima experiment had changed the equation. Superman and Captain America did not request Imperial rescue, but partnership. The defense of Proxima would be a joint operation, combining the Liberation Front's innovative tactics with Imperial military might. Guilliman himself took command of the Imperial contingent, bringing with him elements of the Ultramarines and Imperial Fists. The battle that followed became legend, not just for its military significance, but for its demonstration of what humanity united could accomplish. Superman's powers proved devastating against Tyranid biohips, his heat vision cutting through chitinous hulls while his speed allowed him to coordinate multiple fronts simultaneously. Captain America's tactical genius transformed Imperial Guard formations from meat shield fodder to precision strike forces, utilizing terrain and coordinated fire patterns to maximize effectiveness against overwhelming numbers. But it was the civilian response that truly demonstrated the experiment's success. Rather than cowering in fear, the population mobilized with discipline and purpose. Manufacturums converted to weapons production without decreasing output. Medical facilities coordinated seamlessly with military triage units. Even children contributed through civil defense preparations that saved countless lives. 7 weeks after the Tyranid assault began, the last Synapse creature fell to a combined strike force led by Superman, Captain America, and Guilliman himself. The victory was total. The Hive Fleet tendril completely destroyed, rather than merely repelled. Analysis by Mechanicus Adepts confirmed casualty rates 73% lower than Imperial statistical projections for comparable engagements. In the aftermath, as reconstruction began with remarkable efficiency, Guilliman sought out the 2 heroes who had challenged the Imperium's most fundamental assumptions. They met on a hillside overlooking a city already rebuilding its population, working with purpose rather than fear. "My father is watching," Guilliman stated without preamble. "He has monitored every aspect of this experiment. Your methods, while unorthodox, have proven effective beyond statistical projection." Superman nodded. The question was never whether humanity could be more than the Imperium believed, only whether they would be given the chance to prove it. "A chance is what you've earned," Guilliman replied. "The Emperor has rendered his judgment. The Proxima model, as it's being called, will be implemented in selected systems under careful observation. A new form of imperial governance existing alongside the traditional structures." Captain America studied the Primarch's expression. "That's not full victory." "No," Guilliman acknowledged, "but it is evolution. The first real change in imperial doctrine in 10,000 years. My father does not reverse his decisions lightly, if at all. This represents a seismic shift in imperial philosophy." Superman's gaze turned toward the stars, visible even in daylight to his enhanced vision. "It's a beginning, a seed planted that can grow across millennia. The Imperium wasn't built in a day, and it won't be transformed in one either." "And your role in this transformation?" Guilliman asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. Captain America smiled slightly. "We'll continue to serve as examples, not as rulers or conquerors, but as reminders of what humanity can be at its best." The Primarch nodded, something like respect in his ancient eyes. "Then perhaps, after all these millennia, my father has found what he truly needed. Not generals or administrators or worshippers, but challengers. Those willing to question his vision while sharing his ultimate goal." As Guilliman departed to coordinate the expansion of the Proxima model to other systems, Superman and Captain America remained on the hillside, watching humanity rebuild with renewed purpose. They were no longer outsiders now, but integral parts of a possible future, one where the Imperium of Man might slowly transform from an empire of fear to a commonwealth of hope. The warp storm that had brought them to this grim, dark future had never reappeared, and perhaps never would. But they had found new purpose here in the twilight of humanity's long journey. Not to overthrow or destroy, but to remember and rebuild. To stand as living symbols of virtues long forgotten, but never truly lost. In the golden throne chamber on distant Terror, the Emperor's withered hand moved again, closing slowly into a fist, then opening once more. The gesture went unnoticed by all save the silent custodian standing eternal vigil. What it signified, only the master of mankind could say. Perhaps acknowledgement, perhaps challenge, perhaps in some small measure change. The God Emperor of mankind had ruled through fear for 10 millennia. Now, for the first time since the Great Crusade, he contemplated the alternative. He was contemplating not weakness as he had long believed, but an entirely different kind of strength. Only time would tell whether this new seed would flourish or wither, and whether humanity's path would truly change or just find a temporary divergence before snapping back to grim necessity. But for now, in that precise moment, Superman and Captain America had accomplished something no other force in the galaxy had managed in 10,000 long years. They had given the Imperium of Man something it had long forgotten how to even recognize.